Howdy folks, welcome back to the Defensive Shooting Fundamentals series. Now that we've talked about our grip, our high compressed ready, and the extended shooting position, we are ready to get you out on the range for your first live fire drills. So stick around. Alright, so the first live fire drill that you're going to practice is going to be the extend, touch, press drill. And what we're going to do is we're going to place a target that is about an 8x8 target, something that looks like this here, that it's about a hand, it's about my hand span here, but it's about 8x8 target, and 8.5x11 sheet of paper will work as well. So any target about that size that would represent the high center chest as a target. And what you're going to do is you're going to set that 3 to 4 yards away. You're going to unholster your firearm and go to the high compressed ready. You're going to pick it up off whatever table you're shooting off of. And from there, you're going to break this down into the extension to the target, touching the trigger, and then pressing off one round. It's going to look like this. You're going to extend the gun straight to the target and in parallel to your line of sight. You're going to touch the trigger without taking up any of the slack. You're just touching it with your trigger finger. And then in one smooth rearward motion, you're going to press the trigger to the rear until one shot goes off. You're going to index your finger, come back to the high compressed ready. Now what we're practicing at this 3 to 4 yard distance is our kinesthetic or our natural alignment with the gun. So we're staying hyper focused on the target. We're not using our sights. We're relying on our body's natural ability to point this pistol at a target of this size. Okay? I want to explain some of the specifics about why we train this particular way with the extend, touch, press drill and the subsequent drills that we're going to be talking about. First of all, I want to clarify what a good hit is when you're shooting the extend, touch, press drill. Now, we're shooting something that represents the high center chest, 8x8-ish target, about a hand span or an 8.5x11 sheet of paper is a good reference. And as we're practicing this, any hit within that target area is a good defensive hit. So don't worry about it. As long as you're getting good hits on that, you've got good alignment. The second thing I want to talk about is what it's really going to look like when we have our firearm presented at the target. Because we want to be able to rely on our kinesthetic alignment to get good hits at 3 to 4 yards. And we want to be able to see what that looks like when it's correct. Another thing we want to talk about is what a correct presentation will look like. Now, we're practicing unsighted fire where we're not using our sights to shoot at this 3 to 4 yard distance. We're relying on our kinesthetic alignment. So what that is going to look like is we're going to have our pistol presented at the target, and our target is going to be crisp and clear. Now, the eye can only focus on one thing at a time, so we're going to make sure that in this instance, it's the target. So we're presented to the target, that target is crisp and clear, we can see all the lines, and the gun is going to be a little bit blurry. It's still going to be in our cone of vision to the target, obviously, and in parallel to our line of sight, but it's going to be a little blurry. Now, why we train like this? Under the serious stress of a lethal threat, you are most likely going to experience tunnel vision. So you may or may not be able to see your gun in your line of sight to the target, even though you have it presented. So we want to train to be able to rely on that kinesthetic alignment because our brain is going to be hyper focused on that threat and is going to be trying to take in as much information as possible. Now there are ways to train around that and to be able to use your sights when that is necessary, and we'll address that in another video. The next thing that we want to be able to talk about to make sure that we're doing efficiently is controlling the trigger. So with our finger, when we touch the trigger, we want to make sure that we're touching it with the portion of our finger that is best for pressing the trigger straight to the rear without moving it right or left or up or down. We want to have a controlled, straight rearward press. So we want to make sure that we touch it with that portion of our finger on the same part of the trigger each and every time, so that we have a consistent rearward press. All right, you don't need to do the extend, touch, press drill too many times. Honestly, 2, maybe 3, and as long as each time you've been able to get your shot into the target area that represents the high center chest, you're good to go. And what we typically move on to pretty quickly is a up command. And if you're training with somebody else, it can be the command of up. If you're by yourself, it can be off of whatever mark you want. But the up command, you merely extend. On that command, you extend to the target, you touch the trigger, and you press it as quickly as you believe you can get a hit in that target area. And again, you do that 2 to 3 times. You don't need it to do it a whole ton. It's just till you can prove to yourself that you've got that good alignment. A couple of things that can come up when we're trying to do this a little bit faster. You know, being efficient and quick with it is good, but we want to make sure we avoid these pitfalls. So first of all, we do not put our finger on the trigger and press it until we have reached full extension, like this. Once we've reached full extension, we move our finger down and we prepare to press off that shot, however quickly you feel capable of hitting that target. Now, the reason for that is if you press a target off without reaching that biomechanical stop of full extension, you can have a little bit more deviation there than you intended. This is the target I shot while filming this video, and this round right here was most likely shot before I reached full extension. Now, I know from watching the video that it was my first shot on that particular extension for the drill I was running, and I was pushing myself, and obviously I shot a little too early, and that extra deviation brought the bullet out of the target area. Now, I only know that for sure because I have it on video and I was able to play it back. But that is one of the things that you want to be able to watch out for, making sure that you're hitting full extension before putting your finger on the trigger and pressing off a shot. Now again, you don't have to do an up drill more than 2 or 3 times really. Once you've proven to yourself that you consistently can present and press off a shot into that target area, you're good to go. Well, and we want to move on to practicing to shoot multiple shot strings. So the next thing that we're going to do is on the command of up, we're going to get into our extended shooting position and shoot 2 rounds. And that adds a couple different things. First of all, we're going to be pressing the trigger multiple times, and we're going to be dealing with recoil. So how do we manage that? For recoil, what's going to happen is once we get into our extended shooting position and we press off a shot, the gun is going to travel upward, depending on your skill level, a minimal amount to, a few inches. And what we want to do, because we're staying focused on our target, right? We're not looking at our gun to make sure it's back on target. What we want to do to make sure it is back on target before we press off any subsequent shots is just let the recoil settle. So what it's going to look like is something like this. You're going to extend and shoot. The gun is going to travel upward a little bit, and then you're going to let that recoil settle, and you're going to point the gun back on target and press off your next shot. All right, now we're going to talk about trigger control for multiple shot strings. We want to have a good trigger cycle, and what that means is we've already talked about having a straight rearward press, but when we're shooting multiple times, as we let our finger forward so that the trigger will reset, we want to make sure that that is a straightforward motion as well. So we're moving back and forth in a perfectly straight line as much as we can. And the other thing we want to make sure that we do is that while our finger is moving through that cycle, through those multiple shots, that we don't move our trigger finger from the face of the trigger through that cycle. The reason for that is because once we take it off, it creates that space, it creates that extra variable that could mess things up and move subsequent shots off of target. So as we transition to shooting 3, 4, and 5 times on an up command to the high center chest, we want to make sure that we let the recoil settle between each shot and that we have a good trigger cycle, not letting our trigger finger leave the face of the trigger through that shot string. Now the point of shooting these multiple shot strings between 3 to 5 rounds is all about controlling recoil and making sure that we can shoot enough ammunition fast enough to stop people. We know from dash cams, from body-worn cameras and CCTV that it takes on average 3 to 5 rounds to stop an assailant. So how do we go on training from this? And once you've practiced shooting 3 to 5 shots, you don't really need to stop and practice that over and over again, because you're going to do that through the rest of your practice anyways. You don't need to specifically say, I'm going to shoot these many rounds to practice. You can do that on your own, that's totally fine, but what we do in classes is move on to the continued up drill, where we're calling that up command, which means you present and shoot that high center chest 3 to 5 times. And each time that up command is called, you shoot a different number of rounds. You pick a number between 3 and 5, because, like we mentioned, we know that that is typically the amount of rounds fired that you need to stop an assailant. Now, why do we want to choose a different number every time? We don't want to get into a pattern of shooting. If we got into a pattern of shooting, let's say competition shooting, there's a lot of double taps. So these shooters are used to shooting each target twice. Tap, 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 tap. Now what that can do is, if you get into a defensive scenario, shooting where someone is trying to hurt or kill you and they need to be shot, you may shoot twice and they're still coming at you, and you've got this disconnect in your brain, like, oh, that should have taken care of the problem. So we want to train to shoot 3, 4, or 5 rounds, alternating, choosing a different number each time so we don't get into that pattern. Now, 3 to 5 rounds is still a pattern, so in your own personal training, you want to shake things up a bit and shoot 3 to 6, 7, or whatnot, making sure that, again, you're not shooting the same amount of rounds each and every time. Now, another part of it, as we've gone through the technical side of how to present a gun to a target and press the trigger and put the bullet where you want it to be. We're going to start now to talk about how to train our mind for a defensive encounter. So on these subsequent up commands or whatever starter you have, if you're training on your own, that tells you to present to a target and press the trigger multiple times, you want to visualize the type of behavior that would make you point a gun at someone and press the trigger. And you want to visualize the change in behavior that would cause you to stop shooting. So when I am squared up to a target and I present and I shoot 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it's because they've come running at me with a knife, they've started shooting at me, and I present the gun to stop that, and I visualize that happening, them assaulting, and then as you stop shooting, you visualize that behavioral change and you come back to the high compressed ready. Now what this does is it prepares us to act based on what stimuli is coming in through our vision, instead of just training to get into a rut and every time we present we shoot X amount of times.
Up. Up. Up.
Thank you for joining us for this latest installment of the Defensive Shooting Fundamentals series. I know that the content in here is going to really help your personal practice. The next video is going to be talking about how we can transition to our sights when the target need dictates that, and how we can do that working well with what our body does naturally in a stressful defensive encounter. So if you aren't already, hit that subscribe button and the bell so you can be notified when we upload new videos, and please share with your friends that you think would find this helpful. Thanks again for watching and have a great day.